Does it stress me out a little bit that we're already in 2025 somehow? No, not at all. Absolutely not. Let's do a start of the year book tag. Obviously, this has gone around quite a bit. Larry Reads is the one that I originally watched this from, so make sure to go check her video out. She's pretty much the OG booktuber. Love you, Larry. Let's get right into this. So first of all, we're starting off with my reading goal, which I've talked about before. I want to read 90 books in 2025, and I feel like this is slightly under ambitious for me considering the last 2 years I've read over 100 books. But the reason I'm kind of lowering my objective this year is because I'm in my 1-year clinical placement for school right now, and this does mean that literally the entire month of August, probably honestly July, August, and September, I will be studying for my like big certificate exam that costs $1,000 to write and literally makes or break whether I can work or not. So my whole life is, I feel like, going to be dedicated to studying for that exam when the time comes. I'm basically like vetoing those months in terms of reading. Like I hope to read, obviously, but I'm kind of like not putting any pressure on myself. So I feel like 90 books is reasonable for what my life looks like this year. I obviously had a lot of other goals, like when it comes to reading more subgenres, which we'll get into later. I also had goals related to like reading new authors and new releases and things like that, which I've gotten to in another video, so I'm not going to repeat myself. My most anticipated release. So I have 2. Obviously, I have way more than 2, but I was trying to narrow it down. And I'm with everybody else in this, obviously, where I cannot wait for Onyx Storm. Like, I literally feel like I am on the edge of my seat waiting for this book to come out. It's literally all I think about. I've strategically made sure that I'm reading books right now that I feel like I can have finished by the day that that comes out, because that is all I'll be reading after that. The second book is The Ballad of Fallen Dragons by Sarah A. Parker, which is the sequel to When the Moon Hatched. This was my favorite book of 2025. I absolutely loved this book with my whole heart. Do I remember literally anything that happens? Not really. I just remember that I loved it, but I know I'll have to reread this before that book comes out, but we don't even have a cover yet, and I think it doesn't come out till the fall, which is right around the time that I won't have any time to read. That's great. Tropes I want to read more in 2025. The first one is Single Dad. I've never been a big single parent romance lover. I read a couple of them this year, specifically the Rose Hill series by Elsie Silver. I loved this series. I loved both books. They were both 5 stars for me. And I do think I read some other single dad books. Oh, I don't even remember. But I do think I read a couple and I loved all of them. So maybe that's a trope I actually do love. So I'd like to read more this year to like confirm that suspicion. And then for more like spicy books, I want to read more Inexperienced and Experienced, because that's my favorite like spicy trope. There's just always so much more tension, and it just feels so much more adventurous for our like characters who are inexperienced. I have a couple on my TBR specifically that I feel like fit that theme, specifically Sarah Kate books. She writes really good like experienced and inexperienced tropes. And I'm also reading the Legacy of God series by Rena Kent, which I feel like does have a lot of that same vibe as well. Any rereads planned for the year? Yes. Okay, so I already reread Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, so we're already off to a good start. I'm usually not a big rereader, but I feel there are some books you have to reread in order to like be able to really enjoy and experience the next books in the series, but one is not in a series, and that is Funny Story by Emily Henry. And the reason I want to reread this is because I read this on audio and I feel like I wasn't really paying attention most of the time, so I didn't really like it. Now that I have the physical book, I want to tandem read Funny Story with the audiobook, and I think I'll enjoy it a lot more because I love Emily Henry and I'm really sad that I didn't love this, so I really want to give it another shot. I did already mention When the Moon Hatched. I will be rereading this before the second book comes out, and I'm probably going to tandem read this with the audio as well. I've learned that I love to tandem read for my rereads. I think this is because it feels kind of like you're reading a new book because you're reading it in a different way. So you're like experiencing the book in a different way for the first time, because when your TBR is so long, you kind of feel like you're wasting time rereading books. So I feel like doing it this way, it feels like a different experience. So it doesn't feel like you're wasting time, if that makes sense. And another book I already know I'm going to want to reread is Quicksilver by Kelly Hart. I don't know if the sequel to this book is going to come out in 2025. I don't even know if we've heard anything about that. But I enjoyed this book, but I think there's a chance that I could love this book on the reread, because I felt like the reason I didn't enjoy this so much was, first of all, because of like it led with lust instead of love, but also the world building got confusing to me at one point and I kind of lost interest during that time, but then I started to get into it again. And I think the reread, knowing what I know about it and then going back in, I think that I would understand the world better and the lore better, knowing the characters will fall in love and like how they fall in love, I think will make it not as bad that it led with lust. Genre you want to read more of in 2025. So I definitely didn't do a good job at like narrowing this down to one for each question. I have 3. And some of these, I guess, more are like subgenres. I want to read more historical fiction because I do feel I could be a historical fiction lover, but I just never give it a fair chance. Because everything I've read that's even been like remotely close to historical fiction, even if it's like kind of fantasy, but it's also historical, I end up loving. So I feel like there's a chance that I actually will love historical fiction, but I have this weird thing where I just think I'm going to hate it because I hated history in school. I feel like I'm going to hate historical fiction. I'm being closed-minded. And I need to broaden my horizons a little bit. Another one's magical realism. Ashley Poston writes a lot of magical realism, but I have a couple other books on my TBR. These are some of the magical realism books I want to read. A Novel Love Story, The Dead Romantics, both by Ashley Poston, and then Expiration Dates by Rebecca Searle. And I'm sure there are others that I just am not aware of. I really like magical realism. I also like fantasy that gives magical realism vibes, like Divine Rivals. There's just something about it being just a touch of magic that I feel like makes it so much more immersive because you can almost picture it being real. And if you're somebody who believes that there are like magical elements to real life, because sometimes I feel like there are just a lot of things that we don't know, you know? And magical realism just gives you that sense of imagination that you had more when you were young. And I love feeling that as an adult. Like it just gives you a feeling of home and comfort. And I want to experience that more this year. And lastly is paranormal romance, because I read Phantasma this year, I read Bride this year, and both of those are paranormal romances, and I absolutely loved them. I loved that they felt so different than a contemporary romance. It kept it interesting and it felt less repetitive than other genres that I've read because it's all new. Like I don't know what's going on, and I think it also gives more of an element of surprise at the ending of these books. Like in a normal romance book, you know how it's going to end, but I feel like with paranormal romance, there's always like a fun twist at the end. There's always something that you weren't expecting, and I love that it's like just it gives you a different experience. 2 books specifically that I'm excited to read this year that fall under that category are Ice Planet Barbarians. I just want to try. Okay, I know it's more of like a monster romance, but I'm gonna go with paranormal on that one because it's like aliens. And Enchantra, which is the second book to Phantasma. I loved Phantasma, and I think I'm gonna get an arc for Enchantra. I don't want to jump the gun, but I think I could get an arc. Series you want to finish the most in 2025? Throne of Glass. I read the first 2 books literally in January of 2024, and I didn't realize it's been a year. Like I was gonna take like a month or 2 off, and then I never went back to it. So I did just get the audiobook for Crown of Midnight and Heir of Fire because I know that I'm more likely to read them if I have the audiobook so I can tandem read. So I'm definitely hoping to continue that series probably in February or March. Probably. I am in my fantasy era. And the other one is Zodiac Academy. This one's kind of up in the air. Not gonna lie. I'm hoping that I have the motivation to finish the series because I got an arc of Neverkeep by the same authors, and I believe this is like in the same world as Zodiac Academy, but it's just like a different set of characters. I feel like I have a duty to read the last book. This is the only book in the Zodiac Academy series that I actually own. I got an arc for it, and I don't know why they chose me because I had never read the series, so I didn't read it before it came out. But it's signed by both of the authors, which is really, really cool. And I just feel this obligation to make it through the series, and I'm already on book 5. So realistically, I only have 4 books left. Mind you, these books are the equivalent of like 7 books each. Like, this is the size of my torso. No, it's not, but it's close. Hopefully I finish that series. A popular book I hope to finally read is Lightlark by Alex Astor. I have so many friends that love this book, and I love the covers of them. I love the idea of them. I love this like island that comes around every 100 years that has games and rulers, and it's literally everything I love. So there's no reason why I haven't picked this up yet besides being worried I'm not gonna like it. And honestly, I just love the author. Like I love following her. I love seeing her on my social media. Like she just exudes this brightness and happiness that I love. So I want to support her. I do have an arc for her romance book that comes out in March of this year that I also will be reading. A book I fear I will not get to. A Haven of Brimstone and Darkness by Lucinda Dark. This is the 4th book in the Mortal God series. I became obsessed with the Mortal Gods series in 2024. I read all 3 books back to back and absolutely loved it. It became one of my favorite fantasy series of all time. And then I waited for this next one, and it finally came out, I think, in like December or November. And I'm worried that I've been out of the world for too long so that I'm not going to get to it, because I honestly don't even remember how the 3rd book ended. I think my plan is to go through my notes and highlights, maybe read the last chapter or last couple chapters of the last book and see if I get that desire to pick up the next one, because I remember thinking like, I cannot wait for the next book, and then it came out and I did not read it, and now it's been a while. So I fear the time has passed, but hopefully not, because I loved the series. Authors I want to try out in 2025 for the first time. A big one for me is Kristen Hanna. I actually own 3 books by Kristen Hanna. I own The Women, The Great Alone, and The Nightingale. And I've heard such good things about Kristen Hanna. I don't think I've ever heard a bad thing. I've never heard a bad review of Kristen Hanna's books. And yet, for some reason, probably my fear of historical fiction, I have not picked up a book by her. This year will be the year. I'm going to do it. Another one is Nora Roberts. I ended up getting this Arc of the Mirror by her, which is book 2 in the Lost Bride trilogy, so I'm going to have to read book 1, obviously. But the cover is very beautiful, and it's actually my sister's favorite author, and I really want to be able to connect with her on that, so I do want to give her a shot. And then another author is Neil Schusterman. I got this Arc for All Better Now. I didn't realize this is the author of Scythe? Is that, I don't know how you say it. I don't know if you pronounce the C or not. Scythe. It is Scythe. Okay, so this author also wrote the book, I guess it's the trilogy for Scythe, and I actually just ordered that book on Book Outlet, so I'm really excited to get that in. But I have this Arc for All Better Now, and I believe this is kind of like a almost dystopian, like it's a post-pandemic type of thing, and it really already, I'm like 4 pages in. I just started it, so obviously I will be reading this author this year, but it gives me Black Mirror vibes like right off the bat, and I think this has 4 different perspectives, which I always really enjoy those kinds of books, so I'm very excited to get into this one actually. And this one comes out in February, so I'm excited to give you like a full review, so maybe you guys can pick this one up. Authors you're saying goodbye to in 2025. I always feel bad about answering this question, but a big one for me is Emily McIntyre. Not necessarily all of her books, but her dark romance books, I just don't like them. I've tried to pick up a couple books in her like fairy tale retelling series, and every single one I've DNF'd. I don't know why. I don't like them, and they're just not for me. I don't know if it's the writing. I don't know if it's the characters. All I know is that I have not enjoyed my time. But I know she has the Sugar Lake series, I think, that's coming out, or getting trad published, and the covers look really cute, and it's romance, so I might give those a try. So I'm saying goodbye to Emily McIntyre, dark romance author, but maybe hello to Emily McIntyre, romance writer. Another one's Laura Thalassa. I read Rhapsodic in 2024, and it is literally my least favorite book I've ever read, probably up there with my least favorite book I've ever read, and it was extremely disappointing, and I honestly cannot see myself picking up another book by this author for that reason. Like, I just literally don't think I will ever reach for one of her books again. On another note, authors I want to give another chance to in 2025. A big one for me is LJ Shen. I read Truly Madly Deeply, which I had an arc for. I did not like this. It is a part of a series, so I will probably pick up the next book in the series. It's not that I hated it, but I really didn't understand the hype too much when it came to my preferences. It wasn't up there for me. I don't know. I think that the main male character was just almost like too arrogant and too confident. I think there's a fine line for me on like when it's just too much in a contemporary romance. Like, dark romance is a bit different. I feel like the man is like broody and arrogant and annoying. It's kind of part of the plot usually. But in this book, he was literally just a dick. And for someone who like knew her when they were young, he was just kind of an asshole. And I wasn't vibing with it. And another one is Mary Kay Andrews, because I read a Christmas novella by this author. The entire time I couldn't decide if I liked it or not. Her writing is just extremely one-dimensional and simple, but almost in a way that's really easy to read. So I'm kind of conflicted because it's almost kind of boring, but it's so easy. I want to give her books another shot, especially because I do know a couple people who love her books. So I feel like I want to give her like full books a chance rather than just the novella. Series I won't be finishing in 2025. Devil's Night, hated it. Up there with my least favorite books of all time. Definitely of 2025. Another one is a Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. I read the first book in the series and I actually liked it. Like, I gave it 4.5 stars, but I just don't feel like a series makes sense. In thrillers, to me, series don't make sense. The whole point of a thriller, in my personal preference and opinion, is that there's a problem, something's going on, you're trying to figure it out, and at the end of the book, you figure it out. If you're in a series, are you figuring things out? And if so, why are we making it a series? Can't we have like interconnected books or something? Like, I would have loved this if these were not connected in any way, so that I could just like pick up the random book whenever I wanted to based on the blurb and how it sounds to me. And maybe that is the case with these, but I don't think so. Like, I think you do have to read them in order, and for some reason that just turns me off of them, which sucks because I really like the covers and it's really fun. I do think I'm going to keep these on my shelf because who knows, maybe my thoughts will change. I'll just be in the mood for an easy, quick YA thriller. But I do think before I'd ever give this one another chance, I would read her other book, which is like The Reappearance of Rachel Price. I got that from Book of the Month a couple of months ago, and if I really liked that, maybe I would come back to this. Series I want to start in 2025. The Legends of Thesmar by Helen Schurer. I can't say her name. There's a lot of R's and E's going on. This one, I think the first book is Blood and Steel, and I've heard literally so many rave reviews of this book, and the blurb actually sounds fantastic. I'm somebody who just purely gives into the hype. I literally live on hype, which is really bad because sometimes I will purposely not pick up a book if I've never heard of it before. Trying to get better at that. I placed an order on Book Outlet recently, and I did actually get quite a few books that I've never heard of, which is very good for me. And then we have the Dirty Air series by Lauren Asher. I've had these books on my shelf for years, and it is time because I feel like I'm gonna love these. I have the indie covers, and I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion. I actually love when the pages are like a mix of black and white. So like you have like the lines on the paper side. I don't know what it is. It's very aesthetically pleasing to me. And these covers are so gorgeous. I really do prefer the indie ones. I love the font of the indie ones. The matte covers are just stunning. I love them. I'm so mad I don't have the last book in the series in the indie covers. They've been in my TBR for way too long, so I actually really do need to read these. I almost fell over. My 5-star predictions. Beach read is a big one. I love Emily Henry, and I've been waiting to read this book. I'm picking the perfect moment this year. I kid you not. I am waiting until like the first week of summer when it's just the most beautiful that it has been. That's my goal. And I feel like the vibes will make it a 5-star. Obviously, Onyx Storm, I think it's gonna be a 5-star. I just think there's so much that's gonna happen in this book. We put so much time into world building. We put so much time into building love for characters that in my opinion, there's no way it could not be a 5-star. The Ballad of Fallen Dragons, once again, talking about this book again, just based on how much I love the first book, I feel like the second book will also be a 5-star for me. I just think that I'm so invested mentally and physically and emotionally and spiritually. There's no way it won't be 5 stars. And The Women by Kristen Hanna, which I talked about earlier, I think that will be 5 stars. I just think it's like completely right up my alley in terms of what it's about. And I think that anything that can really make me feel a lot of emotions ends up being a really high rating for me. And I've seen people love this book and really find it emotional and they connect to it really well. So 100% feel like that's going to be 5 stars. It'll probably change my life. And my most anticipated sequels. First of all, I want to talk about The Fox and the Falcon by Piper CJ. This is the second book to The Deer and the Dragon. I got that book as an ARC when it was coming out and I didn't read it on time, but I eventually did read it and I absolutely loved it. Although I felt like it had a lot of potential to have a great sequel. Like the book itself, I liked it. I had a good time, but a lot of things just felt kind of weird and like out of place and it didn't flow great to me. I did feel like it had a lot of potential to have an amazing sequel. So I'm really excited for this. This one comes out in February. I'm hoping I can get to it before it comes out. And I really love the covers of these. The sequel to The Rising Order by Clara Senthal. I'm hoping this comes out in 2025. I believe she just finished the manuscript for this. I don't think we have a title. I don't think we have a cover, but I loved the first book. The first book in the series was one of those books where it is setting itself up for an amazing series. This book is like a pre-dystopian type of book where like we're kind of leading up to the fall of humanity or like the fall of the government, and I love that. So I feel like the next book is going to be absolutely stunning. And if the audiobook is just as good as the first audiobook, I will be reading the audiobook. And lastly, we have Wild Side by Elsie Silver. Obviously, I'm on this with everybody else. This is the third book in the Rose Hill series. I gave both first 2 books 5 stars. And the books have just been getting better and better. Therefore, I feel like it's just going to continue to get better. And the next one...
Stop. Peep my time.
Hi. Sorry for the interruption.
Excuse you. Interruption.
But definitely Wild Side. That's like one of my most anticipated. I forgot to put that in my probably 5 stars. It will probably be 5 stars. Let's be real. But that's it. That is my 2025 book tag. I'm interested to see in the future how much of these books we actually read.